Good morning. Thank you for joining me. Today it's Monday. Happy Monday to you all. I say happy because it turns out 1 in 3 Americans are very happy. What's going on with the other 2/3 of Americans? I'd like to ask you, are you happy? Jane, thanks for joining me today. Jane is my cousin living in Syracuse, New York. Syracuse, where I was born. Go Orange Men, hooray. I'm talking about happiness because in previous recordings I've mentioned Americans tend not to stay in their current jobs. In fact, Americans change jobs about 10 times during their lifetime. Coupled with the fact that in 2013, only 1 in 3 Americans are happy, it makes me wonder, what is the formula for happiness? Hi, voice. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'd like to know what makes you happy. Where do you seek happiness? Where are you finding your happiness? I've asked this question of my 12-year-old. Hi, Jeanette. Thanks for joining me this morning. Nice to see you. In a 12-year-old who has been pretty unhappy for a large part of his life, where does happiness come from? In fact, when he was 7, and I began asking this question 5 years ago, he said, Legos make him happy. I mentioned that if Legos were the source of happiness, the Lego company would be out of business, and every day I would fill my pockets to overflowing with Legos. So in a 7-year-old, and in subsequent years, for the last 5 years, I've been asking, are Legos the source of happiness? And my son is still looking and in search of his source of happiness. What is your source of happiness? Older Americans tend to be happy. Studies are showing that Americans 65 and over are happier than younger Americans. Why is that? What's going on with younger people that they're unhappy? It's because they don't know, they don't understand the source of happiness. So in religious circles, of which I was raised in, and my father being very devout and an amazing example of being a strong believer in God and in higher states of consciousness, my father spent a lot of time being happy. And it makes me wonder, are people who tend to be happy already, are they the 1/3 of Americans who are happy? What about people who tend not to be happy? Candace Pert, in her book called Molecules of Emotion, she writes that she discovered the source of feelings in our bodies. The feelings we experience are actually proteins called polypeptides. It's pretty incredible because what she found was every cell in our body has receptors that proteins can attach to, which means every time you feel a feeling and you experience a feeling, your entire body also experiences that feeling. And those polypeptides are produced in your brain and then flooded into your bloodstream and completely bathe your cells in that particular feeling. And we all know this is true because when a spouse is angry and they walk in the room, you can tell with their entire being that they're angry about something. It's also true that when an optimistic or happy person walks into the room, you can tell automatically that they are optimistic and they're happy because their entire body oozes that feeling. That's because every one of their cells are experiencing the feeling that their brain is producing. So what does that mean for us? Over time, this is really fascinating to me. Over time, the feelings that you continually stimulate your cells to experience become stronger. So the receptors on the cells, for example, happiness and positivity, in the case of my father, who was chronically happy and positive to a fault, his receptors on every cell of his body were constantly stimulated with his happiness proteins. And it became a pattern throughout his entire life. Even when he was bedridden, my father was chronically in a state of happiness. What's also true, people who are negative, people who are grumpy, they are in a chronic state of unhappiness, of grumpiness, of seeing all the negative things in the world. And they become people who experience only the negative side of their life. They are the people who, even when given a positive experience, I'm thinking of someone I'm related to who, when we visit, even though this individual says it brings them great joy to have us there, they actually are not experiencing happiness because they continually find things at fault, whether with our visit, whether with something that's happening. In fact, the conversation may be briefly positive and happy, thank you for coming, but then all the rest of the time that we're together, there is this tendency to what's not right, what's making this person unhappy. And this individual lives every day of their life looking at the negative, looking at what's at fault, looking at the pessimistic side. And even in an environment where there could be satisfaction, because the happiness receptors on the cells have not been reinforced, they have not been stimulated, they've actually faded, and it's almost impossible for this individual to experience happiness now. So what does that mean for us today? 1, please discover the source of your happiness. Please learn how to be in the 1/3 of Americans who are very happy, and it takes practice to get here. And the good news is it is a protein that is produced by your brain in your head. That means you can work to produce it. Just like you work to build a muscle, you can work to find the happiness. You can work to look at things from a more positive perspective, but it does take work if that's not your tendency. I have been slowly and methodically helping my 12-year-old with this very process to look at what is positive in the world, to look at the good things that are happening, because he tends not to see those aspects. One way to find the happiness and the positive parts in your life is to practice heart coherence. Heart coherence is something that I've certainly recently been certified in, and I'm very excited to help each and every one of my listeners, my friends, my family, with learning the heart coherence techniques. And the first technique is learning just how to focus on your heart and understanding that our brain has a brain and our heart has a brain. The heart is considered the third brain. Our digestive system is considered the second brain. So if we could get our brains focused on a singular intention, which would be happiness and satisfaction with our lives, things would just be a lot more incredible. So until Wednesday, and I see you again, thanks for joining me, and I urge you to think head-wise, feel heart-wise, and move your body-wise to increase your happiness and become more of the 1/3 of the happy Americans in the United States today.